They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. But what's a life worth? What's the value of a person you might walk past every day, whose entire existence has been flattened into a single damning statistic? For decades, the story of homelessness has been told by everyone except those living it. It's a story told through news reports that can frame human beings as problems to be solved, or worse, nuisances to be cleared away. It's a story told through cruel social media challenges that turn real people into props for a cheap laugh. This constant barrage of stereotypes makes it easy to feel disconnected, to see a crisis instead of a person. But what happens when one of those individuals, someone who's been made to feel invisible, decides to pick up a camera and tell their own story? You get a revelation. A truth so raw and undeniable it forces millions to stop, to look and to finally see. This is the story of Leo, a man the world tried to erase, who fought back with the only weapon he had left, his voice. The video is shaky, clearly filmed on a phone. The audio is a mess of city noise and something much uglier. "Get a job, you bum," a voice screams from off-screen. The camera whips around, but it's too late. All we see is the back of a man in a business suit melting into the crowd. Then the phone slowly turns, reversing the view. We see Leo's face for the first time. His eyes are tired, etched with lines of exhaustion, but they aren't empty. They're burning. There's a flicker of pain, a flash of anger, and then a quiet, unbreakable hardness. He doesn't say a word. He doesn't have to. That look says everything. He holds the camera on his own face for a long, uncomfortable moment. The world has been shouting at him for years. Now he's ready to shout back. Before the phone, before anyone knew his name, Leo was basically a ghost. He haunted a few square blocks of a city that was proud of its progress and wealth. His home was a neatly kept alcove behind a bakery, a space most people hurried past, wrinkling their noses. To them, he wasn't a person. He was an inconvenient stain on their perfect city. Every day was a fight for dignity, a war fought on 1,000 silent fronts. It was in the way people's eyes slid right past him as if he were made of glass. It was the way mothers clutched their purses and pulled their children to the other side of the street. It was the hostile glares from shopkeepers if he tried to find a moment of warmth in their doorways. Each moment was a tiny paper cut. Alone they were nothing. But together they could make a person bleed out. This was Leo's world, shaped by media that often reduces people to statistics instead of showing their humanity. He wasn't a man with a past, with dreams, or a favorite song. He was a number. He remembered life before this. A small apartment, a job at a warehouse, the simple joy of a hot shower. He wasn't a king, but he was a man. Then came the avalanche of bad luck that so many of us are just a step or two away from. A medical emergency that led to debt. The company downsizing. The eviction notice. It happened so fast it felt like falling through a trapdoor. One day he was a citizen, the next he was an outcast. His story wasn't about being lazy or making bad choices. A narrative that's often pushed to make homelessness seem like a personal failing instead of a systemic one. His story was about a safety net that was full of holes. The worst part was the mockery. It wasn't just the insults shouted from cars. It was the smirks, the whispers, the teenagers who would film him for a laugh, their phones feeling like weapons that turned his suffering into their content. He saw himself online once. Some stupid, cruel account dedicated to fails. There he was, asleep on a bench with a slice of pizza someone had thrown at him on his chest. The comments were a sewer of casual cruelty. They called him a lazy addict, a drain on society. They didn't know he spent his days at the public library, slowly searching for jobs on their ancient computers. They didn't know he hadn't had a drink in over a decade. They didn't know a single thing about him. They just laughed. And that's the grim power of these narratives. They create and reinforce stereotypes, making it easier for society to punish poverty instead of fixing what causes it. So often, the conversation is about people sleeping outdoors instead of the lack of affordable housing that forces them there. Leo felt that every single day. He was a character in a story someone else wrote for him, a villain, a clown, a ghost. He was tired of being a punchline. He was drowning in the world's assumptions, and the silence was killing him. The breaking point wasn't some big dramatic event. It was a small, quiet moment of total despair. It was a rainy Tuesday, the kind of cold drizzle that gets in your bones and kills any little spark of hope. Leo was huddled under an awning when a young couple walked by. They were laughing, sharing earbuds, lost in their own perfect world. As they passed, the guy glanced at Leo and his laughter caught in his throat. He nudged his girlfriend, pointed, and whispered something. Her smile vanished, replaced with a look of pity and disgust. They hurried away, their warmth and happiness a universe away from his cold, damp reality. It wasn't the worst thing he'd ever dealt with. Not even close. But in that moment, something inside him just broke. It was the casual, thoughtless cruelty of it all. He was just a brief, unpleasant sight in their perfect day. Not a person. Scenery. An object. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the one valuable thing he still owned. An old smartphone with a cracked screen. It was a relic from his old life he kept charged at the library. He kept it for emergencies, for job applications, to feel some thin connection to the world that had thrown him out. But looking at it now, he saw something different. He saw the small, dark lens of the camera. For so long, cameras had been used against him. They were tools of mockery, weapons of his own dehumanization. But what if he took control? What if he was the one pointing the lens? The idea was terrifying. It meant making himself even more visible, more vulnerable. But honestly, what was left to lose? With a trembling finger, he opened the camera app. The screen flickered on, showing his own tired face, rain matting his hair to his forehead. He stared at his reflection, at the ghost everyone saw. And he made a choice. He wasn't going to be a ghost anymore. He turned the camera around. His first video wasn't of some great injustice. It was just his hands, red and raw from the cold, carefully arranging his few belongings in a plastic bag to keep them dry. He filmed the worn-out sole of his shoe, the hole in his blanket. He filmed the line at the soup kitchen, not as a spectacle of misery but as a gathering of human beings, sharing a story and a moment of warmth. He started filming everything. He recorded the quiet routines that made up his life. This simple act of documenting his day became a form of resistance. He was pushing back, proving he was more than just a statistic. He was a person. He captured the small kindnesses that usually go unnoticed. The barista who slipped him a coffee, the old woman who always said, "Good morning, Leo," a simple act that meant the world. But he also captured the raw, unfiltered ugliness. The security guard kicking him awake at dawn, the sound of a car speeding through a puddle to splash him with icy water, the averted eyes, the hurried footsteps. He didn't really know what he was doing. He wasn't trying to be a filmmaker or an influencer. He was just building a record, a testament. He was collecting evidence that he existed, that his life, in all its hardship and quiet dignity, mattered. The phone, once a symbol of a life he'd lost, had become his lifeline. It was his shield, his megaphone, and his mirror. For the first time in years, Leo felt a flicker of power. He was no longer just a character in someone else's story. He was starting to write his own. Leo didn't know the first thing about editing videos. He didn't have a laptop or fancy software. He just used a free app on his phone at the library, piecing together the clips he'd gathered. The first video he uploaded was simple. He titled it, "My Morning Routine." It started in the pre-dawn gray. The video showed Leo meticulously folding his worn but clean blanket and tucking it into a waterproof bag. It showed him walking 6 blocks to a public restroom, waiting in line, and then washing his face with a small piece of soap and cold water. He shaved carefully with a disposable razor he made last for weeks. He brushed his teeth. He changed into a clean, faded shirt he'd washed in that same sink the day before. There was no dramatic music, no voiceover. Just the sounds of the city waking up and the quiet, deliberate actions of a man holding onto his dignity against all odds. This was the first revelation. It was shocking not because it was sensational but because it was so profoundly normal. It was a quiet, powerful takedown of the stereotype that people experiencing homelessness are dirty or don't care. The video got a few hundred views. The comments were mostly curious, some sympathetic. "I never thought about this," one person wrote. "The logistics of just staying clean." So Leo made another. "Where I get my food." It wasn't just about soup kitchens. It showed him using the few dollars he'd made collecting cans to buy day-old bread. It showed another homeless man sharing half of his sandwich. It showed Leo himself giving one of his 2 apples to a woman who looked like she needed it more. It showed a hidden world of survival, community, and kindness. Then he posted the third video. The one that changed everything. He called it, "Things I've Learned." He sat on a park bench, the city's chaos swirling behind him, and just talked directly into the camera. "You see me," he began, his voice raspy but clear, "and you think you know my story. You think, addict, lazy, crazy. That's the story you've been told. It's an easy story. It's a story that lets you off the hook. Because if I'm here because of my own choices, then it's not your problem. If I failed, the system didn't." He paused. "But that story is a lie," he continued, his voice getting stronger. "Homelessness isn't a character flaw. It's a circumstance. I'm not homeless. I'm a person experiencing homelessness. My identity is not this situation. I was a warehouse foreman. I paid my taxes. I coached my nephew's little league team. Sarah, over there," he gestured off camera. "She was a nurse. The man who sleeps by the bridge served 2 tours in the military. We are not a different species. We are you. We are your neighbors, your co-workers, your family, just without a house." This was the core of the revelation. It's what real-life creators on TikTok and YouTube have shown. Sharing your authentic day-to-day life is a powerful way to challenge stigma and show your humanity. They invite you into their world and it builds a bridge of empathy. Leo's video went on for 10 minutes. He talked about the impossible trap of needing an address to get a job, but needing a job to get an address. He talked about the sheer exhaustion of just trying to figure out where you'll sleep safely each night. He connected his personal struggle to the larger, systemic issues, the lack of affordable housing, stagnant wages, and a shredded social safety net. He was no longer just a man on a bench. He was a teacher and an advocate, giving voice to a truth society had tried to ignore. The video exploded. It was thousands of views, then tens of thousands, then millions. A headline from a major news site read, "Homeless man's viral video forces America to look in the mirror." Social media, so often a tool for ridicule, had become a platform for empowerment, a potential demonstrated for years by advocates like Mark Horvath of Invisible People who use video to give a voice to the voiceless. The comments section became a global town square. "I'm ashamed to admit I've been the person who crosses the street," one comment with thousands of likes read. "Thank you for your honesty. You've changed how I see things." Another said, "This man is more articulate and insightful than most politicians." The video humanized the issue in a way statistics never could. It wasn't about pity, it was about respect. It was a revelation, not of misery, but of profound, resilient humanity. A viral video isn't a magic wand. It didn't instantly fix everything. The day after his video hit 10 million views, Leo woke up in the same alcove behind the bakery. The ground was just as hard. The air was just as cold. But something fundamental had shifted. He was no longer invisible. His phone buzzed nonstop. Emails from journalists, messages from local aid organizations, and thousands of comments from everyday people. They didn't just offer sympathy, they offered real help. Someone started a GoFundMe that raised enough for a deposit on a small apartment. A local dentist offered to do his dental work for free. A clothing store owner told him to come in and pick out a new wardrobe on the house. But the biggest change wasn't in Leo's circumstances, it was in his purpose. He had spent years being silenced. Now he had a voice. And he realized that voice could be a tool not just for him, but for all the others who were still unheard. It was an act of reclaiming his own story and identity. He kept making videos. But now he turned the camera around. He started interviewing other people on the streets, giving them the platform he had found. He became a channel for their stories. He featured Sarah, the former nurse, who spoke powerfully about the lack of mental health support. He interviewed the veteran by the bridge, who talked about his PTSD and the impossible challenge of returning to civilian life. Like the work of advocacy groups such as Invisible People, Leo's channel was now dedicated to educating the public about the real, complex faces of homelessness. He became an advocate, a citizen journalist reporting from the front lines. He used his platform to highlight systemic failures. He filmed the city's sweeps, where workers would throw people's few belongings, IDs, medicine, family photos into garbage trucks. He documented the absurdity of hostile architecture. The spikes and sloped benches designed to make it impossible for a human being to simply rest. His work started to have a real-world impact. After he posted a video about a local shelter turning people away in freezing weather, public outcry forced the city council to change its policy. He worked with nonprofits, using his social media reach to amplify their campaigns and connect volunteers with opportunities. He was no longer just surviving, he was fighting back, using his new visibility to demand justice. Eventually, Leo moved into a small, sparsely furnished apartment. The first night he stood in the hot shower for almost an hour, just weeping. The feeling of a locked door, of a safe space, was overwhelming. But he knew this wasn't the end of the story. For Leo, finding a home was the beginning of a new chapter. He hadn't just found a roof over his head, he had found a mission. The world tried to make him a ghost, a statistic, a punchline. But by turning the camera on, he became something else entirely. A leader, an advocate, and a powerful voice for the voiceless. Leo's story isn't just about one man going from the streets to a home. It's about the power of a single voice to shatter a wall of stereotypes and force us all to confront truths we'd rather ignore. He turned mockery into a revelation by simply refusing to accept the story written for him. He showed the world that behind every statistic is a human being, and that the line between us and them is dangerously thin. His work continues. His YouTube channel is now a vital library of stories that insist on the dignity of every individual. But one man's courage can't solve a systemic crisis. That takes all of us. In a recent video, Leo sat in his small apartment, the city lights twinkling behind him. "I have a roof now," he said, looking into the same lens that became his lifeline. "And I'm so grateful. But I can't sleep soundly while my friends are still out there. This was never just about me getting a home. It's about us as a society deciding to build a home for everyone. The next time you see someone on the street, please don't look away. Don't see a problem. See a person. See a story. And ask yourself what you can do to help." The fight to end homelessness begins with understanding and empathy. If Leo's story moved you, don't let that feeling just fade away. Turn it into action. Please support organizations doing the life-saving work of providing shelter, services, and advocacy. Groups like the National Alliance to End Homelessness, Invisible People, and local shelters in your own community are making a difference every single day. Sharing this story helps change the narrative, but donating, volunteering, or advocating for compassionate policies in your city helps change lives. The solution begins when we see our shared humanity. Thank you for listening.